Hello, everyone, and buenos dias. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all at the Hispanic Promise Summit, and a big welcome to our panelists today. I'm so excited about this discussion. And in this session, we're going to be diving into maximizing and preparing for your human capital. And with me are representatives and DEI champions and experts across a variety of industries to come together and discuss how to create a comprehensive strategy that ensures their Hispanic employee base gets effectively maximized, supported, and recognized. Now, for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and skip introductions and just dive right into this rich discussion. So I'd love to begin with unpacking everyone's DEI strategies a bit. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions around that. What was the methodology for putting your strategy together? What are the focus areas of your strategy, and how were these determined? Fatima, do you want to start us off with this question?
Sure.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be here. Buenos dias a todos. I think for us at Bloomberg, the truth is this is a conversation one can imagine we've all been having for quite some time, and probably for us certainly like many of the companies across 2020 really forced us quite frankly to move into a very different conversation and to really start not just looking at what are nice things to have, but really what are must things to have. And so inevitably a real focus on looking at diverse talent, looking at our talent pool was really critical, really figuring out not just who's here, but how are they doing, and how are we, more importantly, investing in our people and in their trajectories and in their wants and in their dreams, and quite frankly, celebrating the richness that they bring. We have an incredible team that's global. Here in the Americas, I have the pleasure of leading the team here, but we have been able to engage our senior leadership all the way down to our colleagues at every level to really hear their perspectives. And so key to understanding how to support our colleagues and to understand around policy, practice, we've created a framework that really is a bit of a model that looks at our business excellence. But you can't achieve business excellence if you don't understand, if you don't invest in the people who are there to help you achieve that excellence. With that, of course, is accountability. And for us, really focusing on understanding accountability at every level has been key. And ultimately, our goal really is to create an inclusive and equitable workplace. And so creating a culture of inclusion has been key in our strategy. And it's everything from investing in our employee resource groups to investing in what role HR plays in absolutely supporting its people on the ground, to quite frankly looking at ways that in small and big ways that we as a company are investing in people, not just here, but in communities. As people know, Bloomberg is quite known for its philanthropy, and our impact in communities that we live in has been a real commitment that we have maintained over the years. And so although not part of a D&I strategy, an important part of committing ourselves to investing in a culture of inclusion internally and externally.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Alarice, would you like to share next?
Thank you so much for having me here. Hola todos. So when I think about the D&I strategy we have at IBM, it really is centered around 4 D&I pillars. We build community for our constituents, we build and improve talent retention, and we promote talent development leadership. And lastly, we look at improving talent attraction and activation. And when we put together this overarching strategy, it's really about bringing together our global centralized D&I office, which is part of our HR organization. And then we implement it across 8 different communities. And those communities span all of our underrepresented communities, from Black, Hispanic, Pan-Asian, Native American, women, veteran, people with diverse abilities, LGBTQ+. And we use those pillars mentioned above to really intersect across all of these communities and make sure that we're taking the strategy to implement something different that resonates with those respective communities. As part of developing the strategy, we also spend time listening to them. So it's really important to not just put forth a strategy, but actually listen to what are some of the unmet needs and how do we address communities specifically. And so it was a really thoughtful process to do that. And then when I think of how we govern this is also really important because it's not just one of those things you do once and you're done. You have to continually make sure that you're listening to that community and putting in place things that keep the process going. So we work with each of these communities, we work directly with legal, with HR, and our internal teams to make sure that we're always using that feedback mechanism. We created executive councils appointed by senior executives within our organization who have business expertise, subject matter expertise to really implement the strategy and evolve it. And they're responsible for doing that. Each council then builds their own team and works with volunteers to continue to implement the strategies specific to those communities.
That's great. Thank you also for speaking around the various stakeholders involved in this creation and implementation. And to your point, Fatima, on accountability. That's great. Judith, I want everybody to answer this question because it's so integral to our foundation for this discussion. So if you want to go next, I'd love for you to share.
Thank you so much. I mean, at APCO Worldwide, we are a global advisory and advocacy communications consultancy. We were founded in Washington, D.C. So for us, we have decided to approach the DEI work really by looking at racial equity. How does this fit within the need in the US to advance racial equity? And I love the title that was given to this, also in a very collaborative process, like Alarice just pointed out, because we call our umbrella strategy Accelerating What's Right. And we recognize that this is about the responsibility that we all have, not just internally within the company, but externally as well, in terms of just really making sure that we can spark a societal shift in the way that we end racism and do so by promoting diversity, by focusing really on the equity piece and inclusion across the company across all levels. We have a pledge, the Accelerate What's Right pledge, that we encourage. It's voluntary, but pretty much every single employee in North America has signed it, which really spells out the behaviors. And I think, again, similar to what has been mentioned before, honestly, it would make any Montessori kindergarten teacher proud because it was the product of crowdsourcing. It was the product of people working on this jointly, and really it's the product of our company where our employees came up with this issue about how do we make sure that we have more diversity across the firm, but also that we are respectful. And more specifically, we have really embraced the Hispanic Promise. We were original signatories of the Hispanic Promise, and I'm so grateful for not just We're All Human, but anyone that contributed to it, because it really has given us an extremely useful feedback and a framework in which we have anchored not just our own ERG framework and issues and structure, but also the counsel that as a consulting firm we give clients.
That's great. Thank you, Judith, for sharing. And I think on that note around the Hispanic Promise and why we're all here, I'd love to shift the conversation a little bit to our Latino community. So I'd love to start with you, Judith, while we're there, and ask you, when it comes to focusing on the Hispanic community specifically, how do you manage to have focused efforts, as you sort of just started to share a little bit, in addition to that broader DE&I strategy? And I'd love for the rest of the group to also jump in.
It has taken us a while. We were not at this stage. When you looked at our participation and the representation that we had, we did not have levels that matched the current demographics. And we know that the talent is out there. So the first step that we really did was really working with our HR partners to make a very, very concentrated effort to reach talent, to reach people that we know exist out there who are perfectly qualified. But also, I'm really proud of my colleagues who have recognized that some of them have not had easy journeys into these roles and who have taken it upon themselves to go back out to their communities, to go back out to their colleges, to mentor. We have an internal promise to ourselves that we will try and make sure that every time we're recruiting, We are sharing this amongst our networks, including the network of people who are with us today that has proven to be an invaluable community, to really make sure that we may not have historic Black colleges, for instance. It may not be as easy as a single grouping, but we have amazing Latino students in the university population. We have amazing talent out there. And I think just building that network to make sure that we find the people and that we give them those opportunities. Honestly, I feel that the trajectory, once we have the talent, is actually a much easier piece of work for us.
That's great. Anyone else want to jump in and add?
Sure, I will. Judith, what you said just rings so true, right? If you just think about, I'm a data-driven person, so you think about it, we know that Latinos make up 20% of the population, right? And so right there, you start with that premise. And then you start looking at, within your organization, what is that representation? I know at IBM, we looked at that data and we said, wow, the Hispanic population only represents 7% of our employee population. So right there, that was telling us we have a gap and we need to address it. So we take those things really seriously. And for us, we wanted to look at market availability where maybe there's real representation. Are we not looking everywhere for the talent? Because there's top talent, Judith, to your point. It's everywhere. We just have to make sure we're in the places where we can recognize and harness that talent and bring them into our communities. So it's part of our strategy is to get that market availability of each of the communities that I mentioned earlier, because it's really our goal at IBM is to make sure that we represent the communities that we serve and we do business in all of those communities. So we want to make sure we're representative in that way. The other thing I think that's important, which I touched on a bit before, is that we really want to listen to the community as well. So if you want to be able to affect the change, we have to continue to listen to the community, see what are we missing, what gaps do we have, so that we can make sure that we're creating career paths for those individuals, that we're creating career opportunities for those individuals. And so we often host countless office hours to be able to hear concerns and also hear opportunities and co-create with the communities to be able to address some of those programs. That's even how we started OLA at IBM.
I'm going to add on, if that's okay. I would love to add on because I think that we all share a commonality in this reality, right? And one of the things that I know we all can agree on is the importance of collaboration and the importance of collaborating across the organization with our peers in HR, with hiring managers is incredibly important. One of the things that that we have done at Bloomberg that I think is really important is actually we've looked at our recruiting talent and we've realized we really need to make sure that the front line reflects the communities that we're trying to engage, right? And so we have done some really thoughtful work around bringing in a more diverse audience of recruiters because we all sort of know how this works, right? We go to where we know. And so when you diversify that front line, they're going to start to go to the schools that they've attended, the clubs that we were a part of, right? So we go back to Alpha and we go back to our, Hispanic societies at school. We go back to Aspira for those of us that are old enough to remember Aspira, we go back to those places because we know, right? We know that that's where we're going to find that incredible talent that is absolutely present. The other thing, of course, is in New York, we're headquartered in New York, and we have the City University system of New York, which is just incredible. These partnerships with Hispanic serving institutions, but for CUNY, certainly here in New York, or even for SUNY, the state university system, right? To the point of looking at data, New York City's population is 30% Latino. And so we should have an incredibly representative group from which we can absolutely elevate talent from. And so I think that is just right. But for me, what stood out was this collaborative spirit, just to add on to what's already been shared. That collaborative spirit is so rich. So, yeah.
Excellent points. No, thank you so much. Thank you both. I think that's an excellent point to think about the schools and the local communities in which people are already part of. So I think that actually leads into my next question, a little bit around on the topic of representing broadly the communities that we're all serving. What has been your experience? How can companies navigate the complexity around balancing attention, right, between the different minority communities? What has been your perspective? Whoever wants to jump in, feel free to take this one, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
This is a tricky one, Vianni, which I think I think that kind of silence as we all thought about the answer is a tricky one. I mean, I will say that this is my personal view, but I think anyone in the Latino Hispanic community has, I think, felt that perhaps not the right amount of attention was being given to some of the issues that our community faces, especially in the light of the demographic populations, right? The numbers, like Alarice said, the data speaks for itself. So, the correlation may perhaps not have been there. But I think, again, from the previous answer, something that stuck with me is the listening and the collaborative spirit. If you listen and you create space, my experience has been that has really been what has allowed different ERGs in our case to come up, different issues to come up, a sense of coming together as a community as well, given that, let's own up, we have had some difficult community times coming up. Let's think about, what happened in Texas in May of last year. It came as a big shock to everyone. And there was a sense of solidarity of people coming together to really just recognize that what happened in Uvalde was just a terrible thing for us as a community. And I think for us, it's actually been, I think, one of the things that we have both enjoyed the most and received a lot of very positive feedback on has actually been some of the educational information that we have shared. How do we help translate Cinco de Mayo, which is not really, everyone in this audience knows it's not Mexican Independence Day nor any Mexican holiday, but how do you shift that from a moment of drinking margaritas and eating tacos into a moment that can really be a teachable moment, right, where everyone actually has pride for the community and pride for where they stand. And I think for me at APCO, it's been amazing, and I'm truly grateful, because I think sometimes we forget that not everyone has the luxury of being in those spaces that are truly open and that really enable you to show up in your full sense of who you are, with your accent, with the way that you pronounce your names, and that's been fantastic.
Can I add on? I think, Judith, when you started, you actually talked about a racial equity frame that APCO embraces. And for me, I feel like actually in this work, we all know this so well, we don't need enemies because we have many. And so one of the things that has been so key, I think, to the work we're doing here at Bloomberg, and I imagine that we're all doing, has been actually, really coalition building, right? How are we bringing communities together to see the richness of each of our stories? And quite frankly, the responsibility each one of us has in lifting the realities, needs, wants, and equity that is still absent at the table, right? And so whether it's the dialogue around intersection and the fact that, which is more important, or what is more important, or the fact that we walk into a room and we have so many rich identities, and which one is someone leaning on or picking first, or the reality that actually, if I'm in the room and we hear it, we have to say something. And for me, I will tell you, working with our ERG groups, which at Bloomberg we call communities, it has been very profound to see the leadership of our leaders and their commitment to one another. And to see, and to really foster that, right? And to foster that that rich conversation of where, in fact, we still, as a community, us as a community together, right? Like literally, people of color, literally are still inevitably not at the tables. We're not in management. We're not in the, I think what I have appreciated is every time it's one of us, it's a celebration for all of us. And so things that I love are that these moments have truly brought, whether it's Uvalde or Buffalo or any number of terrible moments where we actually really need to embrace one another and say, or here in New York, where we had an Asian young woman on her way to work one morning pushed off the platform. Like, it is really amazing for each of us to support one another, because I think it could be easy for folks to divide us. And I think what feels most important is that really rallying together and lifting is going to be the thing that our communities need the most. As I literally, sometimes I find myself sitting in spaces and I'm like, friends, we already know, right? Like, let's make sure that we are sharing and holding hands, because there are others who really don't want to see that. So.
That is such a good point, Fatima, because while we create all of these different communities, right, it actually is at the heart of it, it's actually bringing those communities together. We can affect a lot more change. And last year, we spent some time with the Hispanic and the Black community in IBM, and we said, we should probably join forces. You're learning a lot already, because a lot of things had sparked after the incident with George Floyd, the Black community learned, the Beam Network and IBM, and they started to put in practice a lot of great things and change. And one of the biggest things was around awareness and allyship. And so you found a lot of people spending time really learning how to be an ally, not just saying it, but actually being upstanders in moments, making sure that voices are heard that typically aren't heard, or just calling attention to some things. That's how you affect the change. In reality is, I kind of like how you were talking about it. It made me think of this, one of my mentors years ago said, you have two hands. One is you rise up and pull ahead, and the other you use to pull someone up behind you. And if you think about that, if we each do that, if each of our communities do that, what kind of change we can make together. So I don't think it's necessarily just one community, it's all of us together really making that change.
Can I just jump in really quickly about that? I think part of it that I love about the way the comments that have been made is also America's changing, right? We talk about a model right now, or demographics right now, but they're changing. And I think the more that we can do by really showing that intersectionality that you mentioned, Fatima, the collaboration. I love the fact that, our Latino ERG collaborates for Black History Month, because we have Afro-Latinos, we collaborate for Women's History Month because of the same reason. And just that, like you said, us coming together makes everything better.
I love that. Beautiful words, everybody. We are such a multicultural, multiracial group that the connection and the bridging, it makes so much sense in every sense of the word. So I want to actually dive deeper into that with this next question. It's a bit of a three-part question, but I want to talk about, the prioritization of the Hispanic community and other minority communities and the advancement comprehensively. Now kind of shifting a little bit into sort of thinking about bringing it back to the D&I strategy, but across different business units, right? So there's internally, there's HR, D&I. Externally, it's marketing, it's consumer, it's external. And then on the community side, and Fatima, you talked about Bloomberg's philanthropy efforts, but CSR and philanthropy being a big core. So how are you looking at the advancement and the prioritization of these multi-communities, right? The Hispanic community, the minority communities, all of the communities as we're talking about them. Fatima, if you want to start with this conversation or start with this question, I'd love to kick off there.
I guess I would say two things. The first thing is sort of going back to the missions and our strategic directions, spreading awareness, articulating and reminding people of the quite frankly, the talent that already exists in the organization, the pipelining of where people are coming from, collaborating regularly to make sure that businesses understand some of what we're trying to do from a D&I perspective. I can't say enough. The word allyship was shared already in this conversation, like just reminding people what is allyship? And as we like to say here, as our colleagues lift here a lot, we feel over mentored and under sponsored. And so encouraging people to understand, like, what is sponsorship, right? Please don't mentor me so that you can train me to be more like you. Actually, I am me. And so don't try to teach me something, help speak for me when you're in the room and I'm not, right? So all of that from an advancement perspective is quite real. But at Bloomberg, one of the things that I've really appreciated witnessing and being a part of is a formal model that we've put in place actually for our what we call here underrepresented talent, right? We're not represented enough and we're underrepresented, and so our underrepresented talent. And so we have a model that really focuses on growth. The acronym is GOAL, because we all have acronyms. So our acronym is GOAL, and it's growth, opportunity, acceleration, and leadership. And it is specifically focused on the development and retention of women, and then our racially and ethnically diverse talent. And so it's 3 years going, and it has been phenomenal to witness because it started in 2016. It's now become quite a franchise actually at the company. We run it here in the Americas, but we also run it in our sister regions in EMEA, and in APAC, in the Asia Pacific region. And we actually have 3 levels, which is really thoughtful. The first level is with high performing, high potential female and ethnically and racially diverse talent. So we have 2 cohorts. Sometimes in that intersectionality, you can ask someone which they prefer to be a part of, but it really is focusing on developing our future leaders. And so you can, when the moment comes where folks are wondering, oh, where do we go? We say, well, look, right? There's this pool of people and everybody in the program gets a sponsor. So those managers who are sponsors, they too go through a training. And so what you find actually are sponsors going to different businesses saying, like, my person's amazing. And so now we're like watching this really thoughtful navigation that sponsors are doing for the members that they're sponsoring. The second level is really developmental, right? So we have goal 2, which is the advancement model, and then goal 1 is the development model. And again, this is on individuals that are considered high performing at the company. Again, female and ethnic and racially diverse talent. So like that richness of really responding to where we have gaps. And similarly, it's around professional growth. It's really around actually that personal introspection, but really investing in that confidence, that networking, that professional network of colleagues, really hopeful around retention, keeping that talent here so we can grow them to be part of that second layer of advanced talent. And then there's a program we do called Goal Insights, which is like the precursor, but we run it specifically with our Bloomberg Latinx community, our Bloomberg Black professional community, and our Bloomberg Pan-Asian community. And so it's a 6-series online training that gives you investment in you, right? So you do it at your own pace, but it is the precursor to give you awareness that these programs exist, so that when you go into an evaluation conversation, you say to your manager, when that goal program comes up, I'd like you to nominate me. I'd like you to be a part of it. I want to be a part of it. So we are planting the seed for their quite frankly, their both awareness, but also self-advocacy. So for us, it's been, and it's across the organization. So, we're seeing it everywhere, and it's been something I think we're really proud of.
That's fantastic. And I think that's actually a great segue to my next question, which is, Alarice, I want to ask you this question. What would you say is the level at IBM that you see of accessibility for opportunities at IBM, at your organization? And what is candidates' exposure to them as we're talking about goal and what Bloomberg is doing? Can you speak a little bit about that at IBM?
Sure, it's great. So for us, as we're very data-driven companies, so everything we do is looking at the same sets of data and then really analyzing that. And to follow up to what Fatima was saying, we don't look at things different by business units. We're actually holding all of our business units accountability by presenting the data to them and saying, here's a gap that we have. And then we even go further and we make sure that we publish our D&I and ESG reports publicly We'll also hold our senior executive compensation accountable for a D&I component. So we're actually making everybody in every organization accountable for it. So it's part of what they have to think about as a business unit. So then you get down to the actual individuals. How do you make sure that you're creating opportunities and space for them to be able to be successful? And Fatima mentioned this key point around sponsorship. That is probably the most important factor for these individuals, because they might be doing the work and not raising their hand. And you already have a lot of people that don't necessarily raise their hand. So we need to be able to create the space and opportunities for them to advance. We launched OLA. We launched a partnership with High Tech back in 2020, which focuses on specifically on our Hispanic technical talent. And we nominate more than 20 plus people to go through that program in that partnership. And it's all about cultivating their executive presence, cultivating their leadership skills. And this is really important, because what that does, it segues them to potential opportunities, exposes them to people who could sponsor them when they're not in the room. As a program part of OLA at IBM, this one, what we realized was, first, did we even have enough people going up to progress to executive? And that was the first thing. So we needed to get our arms around the data to find out if that's something we could do. Now, we'll keep legal and HR aside for a moment, because there are sensitivity, obviously, as we all know, with some of that information. We said we need to know who is the total population and how can we help them. And we went in the spirit of, let's make sure that everyone is prepared for the opportunities and that no one feels that they don't have the playbook for how to be successful. And so we spent a lot of time, my partner, Armando Ortiz, and I spent a lot of time launching this program to prepare potential executives for progression. We did panel presentations with them. We did promotion package reviews. We spoke to their sponsors, their coaches, their mentors, and managers to make sure that we could advocate and be a voice for them when they didn't know that they had them. And one of the key things that came away from that is someone said to us after our their practice presentation, they said, I think I gained guardian angels today. And that was the kind of impact that you're having at an individual level. 100% success rate for all the people that went up through executive that went under this leadership program. That is huge. That's progress.
Congratulations.
Yes, and it all it had to do with is spending the time and taking the time and giving them the resources to be able to be successful. That, I think, has been a breakthrough for us in just a small area, but that if we could scale that at many more organizations, you can start seeing the trajectory change for a lot of those.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. What a great example. And Judith, I want to give you the opportunity to add, if you would like to add anything based on your experience at APCO of what you're seeing.
I think, to me, one of the things that, again, we talked about intersectionality just a little bit ago, and I think the programs that are really impactful are those that recognize, I think those that come from people's experiences. So I think in the same way as it's been mentioned for us, one of the most successful, I would say, tools in our toolbox has actually been a toolkit that was done by our women's leaders, ERG, around promotion time. It's actually applicable across other racial minorities, different ethnic groups. I mean, everyone struggles with promotion, and especially if we're coming out of a pandemic and we're, still not quite sure if you haven't met people that you've been working with. I think, those almost what I call crowdsourced resources, I think are amazing. The second one on this point of intersectionality, again, something that arose as a result of work that we did around the pandemic, is our NCORE program, which recognizes that particularly women may have had to take a career break. And we know that the care burden falls heavily on women. It falls even more heavily on Latino women who have the duty of kids, but also relatives. And this program really is aimed at helping bring women back into the workforce through a very simple job share process. And we're delighted how we are lucky because we get to benefit from amazing talent that we wouldn't necessarily have had access through traditional formats of work in the past.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for sharing. Well, I think before we are officially out of time, we've had such a great conversation here today, but I want to maybe end with, just some last takeaways before we leave, some last comments, any last comments that you want to share with our audience today. So Alarice, Fatima, Judith, feel free to jump in. I want to open up the floor and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. I think that the biggest thing is creating awareness and recognizing opportunities for sponsorship. And if we do those two things, we start changing the trajectory. And you've seen and heard it through all the stories today that I shared, Judith and Fatima all shared today. That's where it starts.
Love that.
So I'm going to plus one what was shared. I'll lift communities and I'll lift the reality that we all want a sense of belonging, right? And we all come to work. Many of us spend more time here than we do with our loved ones. And I'm here at work. So it's one of those realities of when you find community, it matters so deeply. And so I actually love that we have an employee resource group framework, which at Bloomberg, again, right, we call communities that our Bloomberg Latinx community is robust and it's rich and it is inviting. And when we welcome our new colleagues every Monday, we have new hire orientation. And one of the first things we want to introduce them to is the fact that we have this robust framework. To me, they're with the people who serve as the lifeblood of this company, of most of our companies, right? They're the ones committed to creating that inclusive culture. And so I would just remind all leaders to keep investing in what is so key about creating community, because belonging is quite real, right? Inclusion and belonging belong together. And we need to make sure that people have that sense of belonging, create that coalition, and then, of course, an inclusive and equitable workplace should be born out of that. So those would be my additions.
Plus one on absolutely that. Mine, just to add to that, is again something that's been said. If there's no table, build the table, but make sure that you take people to the table. I think it's making sure that you're not there at the table on your own.
Bring that chair. Absolutely. Well, I'm in a community with you all. So thank you so very much for this wonderful dialogue. Thank you for all these great insights and practical takeaways. I want to thank each and every one of you. Muchísimas gracias. And I'll turn it back to the rest of the summit. I hope everybody enjoys it. Take care.
So
Thank you.
Gracias.
Adios.
Bye.
Adios.